Lovely,
Thank
lovely,
you,
Oscar.
Andre.
There are many occasions when I'm glad that I'm a conductor, but never more than at this moment.
Don't say that.
Oh, no, it's true. It's true. That's
Thank you.
lovely. That's lovely. Listen, before we even talk about anything, when you just lately started wanting to play alone a lot as opposed to, with a trio, any particular reason for that?
Well, yeah, there's several reasons apart from any coercion from people like late Duke Ellington and Norman Granz. Was the fact that, as you well realize, it's one thing to play with a group in which there are certain restrictions and regimentations that you have to follow so that they know where you're at and you know where they're at, you hope. Mm-hmm. But also selfishly, when we play at home, as I'm sure you do, and we start experimenting with tunes, I know I've had the feeling that different times that I'd wanted to go possibly harmonically or rhythmically or melodically another way, even just for 2 bars, 4 bars. Mm. And some of these things that come across to me, you can't possibly transmit that quickly to a group, as you can realize. You're playing a tune and you agree, it's sort of a pact that we're going to play the tune this way within certain confines. And if I were to go out, or you were to go out and suddenly take a left turn on a one-way street, it becomes a little hazardous in the group, and what you end up with is dishevelment.
Yeah, but it's one thing to play alone as a classical pianist, obviously, but as a jazz pianist, especially if you've been used for years to hearing, bass and drums or bass and guitar, and all of a sudden you say, "What's this? Oh, it's a left hand, right? I remember this." Mm-hmm. It must really get to be a hang-up once in a while. Not for you, but
No, it is. I think the left hand is in the things that the seminars that I've conducted in various parts of the world. This is the one hang-up that most pianists have, because it's sort of a quiet brainwashing process that takes place when a pianist gets in a group, right? Mm. And he has a good bass player and a good drummer, hopefully, or a guitarist, and he's quietly brainwashed into using less and less of this, especially if he has a guitarist, because they start saying, "You're getting in my way. Don't play that much with your left hand." Mm. So he withdraws this, right? Yeah. And the first thing you know, suddenly, let's say it's a local pianist, he suddenly gets a job in a cocktail lounge, right? Now he's forced to play Body and Soul that he would ordinarily play like this, right? And the bass player is going,
right?
Right?
Yes.
So constantly when he gets into the cocktail lounge, he starts playing, the first playing might sound like You've heard those pianists, you can tell right away, right?
I can even tell you who they are.
One thing is we were talking earlier about some of the pianists, particularly Art Tatum. They had a way of, what's the word they use? Subliminally, musically making you hear something that they didn't play.
I was already worried about what I did hear.
Well, but Art could do this. Art could play, he would lead you down the garden path with a certain left-hand procedure, let's say, and all of a sudden he wouldn't play like, he might play, then leave this one out and play, and according to how he voiced it, you would swear you'd automatically heard it,
Well, even worse than that, I think that on some of those records I could hear a bass player, not a left hand, but an actual bass player, and he wasn't there.
That's what you call coming through. Right?
Yeah. That's what I call it.
Really
now,
coming through.
That's funny, because I wasn't actually going to talk about Art yet, but I don't think it's possible to talk about jazz piano without talking about him. Was he how far back was he an influence on you?
Well, Art Tatum came into my life, I can now say happily. At the time, I had to say unhappily when I was in my teens, and I had not to make this a thing on me, but I know my first
Who do you think it's going to be about?
Us. My first bruising with Art Tatum came at a very tender age in my teens, when my dad originally was a sailor and taught himself organ and taught us piano, started us, and he farmed us out, and I got into the jazz thing, and I thought I was pretty heavy at school, just going through, I'd play lunch hours and have all the chicks around the auditorium.
Good.
And the guys are out taking lumps playing football, I'm playing piano, right? And
things haven't changed.
That's right. And my dad was quietly watching all this. He was very quiet, and I never said too much. And I think somewhere in the back of his mind, he got the feeling that I was getting a little too egotistical about it. And one day he came home and he said, "I got something I want you to hear." you know. I said, oh, yeah. He said, it's a record. I said, yeah, what is it? And he put on the record. I'll never forget, it was Art Tatum's Tiger Rag.
Oh, that's enough to kill you. Yes.
It almost did.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I didn't play piano. I gave up the piano for 2 solid months and had crying fits at night. I did. I'm serious. You know, I really did. I can vividly remember, Andre, and I kid you not when I say this. I'd say, you know, you hear something that awesome, you say, well, first of all, it's 2 people. You know,
right.
When we got over that thing.
At least. Yeah.
Right? We got over that, my father said, 1 man. And when I believed him finally.
And he couldn't see, by the way.
You had to bring that up, right?
Yeah.
I'd go to bed at night, and it haunted me. It actually haunted me that someone could play the piano this well. You know, usually technique doesn't. I think you're a player yourself. You know, technique is technique. You refine it to a certain degree, and you say, well, fine, he's a great technician. But to me, the thing with Tatum was the harmonic thought, the rhythmic thought. The change of cadence suddenly. You know. And I really had a bad time for 2 months, and finally I sort of sobered up and went back.
Did you try to imitate him after that?
No. Happily, no. I did. No. What I did was I listened, as I still do, religiously. But I think, had I listened to Art Tatum, I would have become much the same as several pianists that I know in various parts of the world. And I had that same experience, and I'm glad I didn't, because I remember I first went down to, I won't call the city's name, so I won't hurt anyone. Went down to the city, and it was the same old thing, you know, the piano things about so-and-so's in town, like the Gunfighters, you know. Yeah. And after I did my concert, wherever it was, I was very young, I was 20, 21, they took me over to hear this pianist. And they said, you've got to hear this fellow, he's quite a pianist. So I said, great, I'd love to hear him. He sat down, he said, play something for me. He played Man I Love, straight Tatum, note for note, you know. I figured, well, that's nice. He said, play something else. He played, Sweet Lorraine or something, Tatum. So finally I started thinking, I thought, and I said, and I think I asked him for, if I remember correctly, I've Got Rhythm, right? Yeah. And at that time, Art Tatum hadn't recorded I Got Rhythm. Yeah. And he couldn't play it. That's really a true story. He couldn't play it for the simple reason that he had to wait to see what God was going to say about the tune before he copied it. And he really could. I kept, of course, I just said, well, you must know I Got Rhythm. He kept saying, no, I never played that tune. This is why I never copied. One of the major reasons I never copied art.
Well, see, with me it was different because I had an absolutely straightforward classical education, and when I went to America first, I thought that jazz was, a hotel band and funny hats. What do I know? And the same thing happened. A fella came over and said, listen to this, and put on Sweet Lorraine. Now, I had a very methodical German father who was a music teacher, and he knew how much I admired it, so he said, of course, carrying the logic one step forward, learn that. See? So I learned Sweet Lorraine, I took it off the record, which took me maybe, 3 years, and and then, and like you say, at the end of it, I still didn't know I Got Rhythm, right?
That's right.
But what's funny is that is now, I guess about 30 years ago. Oh, yeah, 30 years ago. I bet I still know the first 8 bars. Wait a minute.
I'd love to hear it.
Huh?
Ask you something.
Yeah.
What did you feel like after you learned it?
Like a jerk, that's what. So what? I knew that, but all I really knew, all I had learned was that I couldn't really make that thing up, but that I had simply copied it.
That's the frustration.
Yeah, I was just taking tracing paper, and copying the drawing. So, as far as that's concerned, in essence, learned I got rhythm, you know, and went from there and played terribly badly for a while. But I mean, the thing was to get away forcibly from that influence, first of all, because it's not good no matter what the influence is. And second of all, it's impossible.
Yeah, it's an overwhelming influence. I think, not just art, if anyone admires a player that much, and you start emulating them to that extent continually, it just overwhelms you. Then you negate any of your own personal creativity that you might have had that would come forward.
Did you meet him? Were you friends?
Yeah, we were very dear friends.
Now, I remember once, though. I remember walking into a club. I don't remember where. I think Detroit or something. And you were doing, I mean, you used to actually announce that you were going to play like a tribute to art. What was the tune that you used to do that to?
Ill Wind.
Ill Wind?
Yeah, Ill Wind. I did an arrangement on Ill Wind for art, and I recorded it quite a few years ago, as a matter of fact.
Well, if I remember the first 8 bars of that after 30 years, can you remember Ill Wind?
I'm not going to guarantee this. Yeah.
Try. I have an image of somewhere in the world, some kid trying to take that off the record.
Well, that's not hard. No, the strange thing about this particular thing, I was just thinking it again as I was playing it, Andre, is that outside of this run,
Yeah.
I don't think I could consciously play you a Tatum run. As you asked me to play that, and as I was playing it, I was saying to myself, you know, this really isn't, it wasn't done really in the art, you couldn't really say that was Art Tatum style. It was probably my reaction to Art Tatum.
That's the best kind of tribute, sure.
And I think this is the way possibly, you know, knowing players go without, I did a tribute for Earl, which was much more stylistically inclined years later because you can only do Errol Garner one way, but I don't mean that as anything.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't. Don't start.
Okay, all right.
But actually with art, you know, it's amazing even in this day and age. Here's a man that has unfortunately passed away, and I still marvel at the fact that so many musicians, not just pianists, as you know, still revere him so highly. And I think that's the greatest tribute to his genius that he could have.
You see, I also remember once that Horowitz, I mean, he used to love Tatum. He used to go and hear him all the time. And he actually was influenced to the degree where Horowitz used to play for an encore. He had 2 arrangements that he made. One was on themes from Carmen, and the other was Stars and Stripes Forever. And they were really scary. I mean, they were unbelievable. And Horowitz decided he would do Tea for Two. So, no, it's a true story. And he went and he worked for months writing out these phenomenally difficult virtuoso variations on Tea for Two. And then he called Tatum and asked him up, and he played it for him. And Tatum said, yeah, you know, terrific, marvelous, you know, and unbelievably difficult. And then he said, would you like me to play Tea for Two? And Horowitz said, yeah. So Tatum then played Tea for Two until Horowitz stopped him. You know, I mean, he just went on and on and on and on. And Horowitz said, well, when did you figure that out? And Tatum said, well, just now. See, and that, of course, that is, of course, the big trick and the big secret, you know.
Instant.
Yeah.
Instant. I was in a piano party, not to dwell on this, but I can remember once, you know, we used to have piano parties where all the pianists would take shots at each other, as I said, like the gunfighters. And I can remember being at this piano party, and there were a couple of interlopers. There were a few bass players like Red Callender, Ray Brown, you know, diversified. And Art was in the kitchen, and it was noon, and he was having a beer or something. And he always, I remember he always turned away from wherever the music was. If you were playing here, Art would never listen like this. He would, you know, turn away like this. And all the pianists, the various pianists that had that kind of nerve, I didn't, but they'd, you know, they'd say, hey, Art, listen to this, and they'd rattle off something, you know, of his or something that they thought would impress him. And he'd say, all right, I hear you. And he came in finally, wiped out all the piano players right away, you know, sat down, wiped out all the piano players. He used to say T for two. And then he called for the bass players. And he proceeded to go through, I think there were 4 bassists there. And he went through all 4 of them, you know, because he started the harmonic thing, the movement with the T for, you know, this. You know, one of those. And of course, I think Red Callender made, well, he went the simple way, so he made a chorus. He got through a chorus.
Played one a bar, huh?
Red Callender went straight down the road, as you say, 1 note to the bar. Yeah. That was it. He can't be wrong. He lasted the chorus, and finally he called Ray over. He said, all right, Ray Brown, come on over here. And he came over, and he played T for two, and Ray lasted, I think, like 8 bars, you know. And he was just that kind of a talent. I don't think I'm sure we won't ever see that again.
Well, I must say I always like to hear him play all alone, you know, not with, and that's, I must say that's why I get such a kick hearing you play all alone. Not that I don't adore the trios, but it's terrific when you play. Can
you imagine being in a group with Art Tatum?
No. No, it's difficult for me to imagine being in a room with Art Tatum. Never mind. I tell you, one of the influences, I mean, the whole thing about Tatum, actually, any pianist that plays jazz who has any kind of facility is going to be influenced by Tatum one way or the other. But the thing that I hear in your playing sometimes, in terms of the kind of time you keep, is Nat Cole. Is that possible?
That's my man. Yeah. Yeah, I think Nat Cole, really, to me, Nat Cole was, his real genius as a pianist was smothered, so to speak, or overshadowed by his great singing, which you can't negate his singing, but selfishly, I was for the piano. Nat Cole, to me, set the trends for a lot of the piano groups. And I think the one thing that he had was infallible time. You know, Nat could play, well, he played figures over and over again. I used them. I learned that technique when I had trios, and you know, there are nights you get up in the stand and the time is like, you know.
Yes.
So, but, well, you know, have nights like that. But Nat would take a figure. That sort of thing. And I used to call them stabilizers. You know, it's the type of thing where no matter what you're doing wrong, you have to shape up right away because it takes hold of you. You know, he had such a great sensitivity for time. He also had, I found that very, very lyrical in his playing. You know?
Oh, well, I mean, for instance, on one of your I think it may have even been your last album, you did a thing called Easy Listening Blues, which I asked you about, and that's the thing that Nat made all those years ago.
He made that with the original trio, or one of the original trios. Right. And it's a very simple blues. It's
so nice.
You know, I've been inadvertently from time to time, not really teaching, but advising and holding seminars for pianists. And we had a school, of course, one time. And whenever the pianists used to come to me and say, like, how do I come up with this thing you call invention or improvisation or, you know, whatever, whether linear or harmonic, I used to send them to listen to Nat Cole records. Nat Cole and Lester Young, because the simplicity of the lines, if you can't eventually, first of all, if it doesn't reach you, you're in trouble. But if it does reach you, and if you can't come up with that, in some way, shape, or form, you're not going to play.
Well, the big trick with Nat, I always thought, was that he not only knew what to play, but he knew what to leave out.
To leave out. This was the big thing. He'd have tremendous spaces in his playing.
That's why I love Basie's playing.
Oh,
It's
the
beautiful.
master of that. You know, Basie is well. Basie to me, again, a very underrated pianist. I remember one night last year on our European tour that I made the big mistake, you know, in the flurry and furor of playing my set. Before I knew it, I went into this, you know. Now you don't do that if you're on tour with Basie, right? and it, you know, the set was going well, and I was, you know, kibitzing around with Niels and Joe and so forth, and saying, yeah, this, that, and the other. And I launched into this, and I remember Neil saying, no, 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 no. It was too late. I was into it. And I came off, and Basie, you know, I love him anyway. I came off, and Basie looked at me, and he said, you know. And I said, Bass, you know, I didn't. He said, And honest to God, Andre, he went on with the band afterwards, right? And I, you know, I always did as much as I could listen to him because, you know, you can't get enough of that. And the band played in 3, 4 tunes, and suddenly Basie just, you know, almost started one of these.
Yeah.
And you know, before he got through like about 3 choruses, he wasted my whole set that went on before. You know, he really did, because I was standing back there, and on top of that, he really got into playing the piano. You know, he just didn't go through that bit.
Yeah, right.
And people, I don't think too many people really realize how much piano Bill Basie can really play. I mean, he can, as we say, he can really smoke if he decides to. You know, once in a while he'll go for it. I saw him do this in Toronto when the band was visiting once. He had a huge room that must held about 1,000 people in this nightclub, and that's difficult. I don't care if you have 2 big bands. And the band had finished one of those things like Red Bank Boogie, one of the real shouters, and Basie started one of these. You know, and the band had just finished this thing, and so, of course, you know, there's so much tension, and the minute the band finished, everybody stood up and applauded, and then they sat down and, you know, passed me my drink, and they're lighting cigarettes, and the bustle is going on, and Basie was sitting there going like this.
Yeah. Well, he was busy.
Right?
Yeah.
And before that tune got into the 3rd or 4th chorus, that room was at a complete standstill. Everyone was like, you know, or patting their feet mildly, you know.
I love when he brings the band in. He's got a kind of a look that brings the
Oh,
band
the
in
look.
that knocks
Yeah,
me out.
that's the one I like. When he's playing, he goes like, you know, he says. I just love him. I really love him.
Listen, we've done imitations now for a
That's
while.
right.
Yeah. Just play something. Don't make me have a nice, graceful lead in. Just let me sit here and hear you play, please. What makes you decide to play a certain tune? I mean, what was it, Love is a Simple Thing?
Love is a Simple Thing.
Well, I mean, I haven't heard that in a while. And the thing is, like, what do you look for in a tune? A harmonic progression, the melody, a remembrance of somebody playing it? I mean, what constitutes when you say, yes, I want to play that, or no, I don't want to play that?
Well, all of those things make me want to play a tune. Years ago, Ray Brown brought in a tune written by a friend of his, a very simple melody.
Yeah.
Well, harmonically, there really isn't anything to that tune, but the melody intrigued me. There are other tunes that harmonically they used to reach me. Another thing that sort of gets to me is suspense in a tune. I call them points of tension,
Show me what you mean.
Well, when I play a tune like Tenderly, now, if I play that, I try to create tension. So I'll harmonically change it around so that hopefully, and not really that purposefully, but hopefully the audience subconsciously will feel this happening if I play it like this. I'll resolve it at the last moment so that everyone can go.
Resolve it, will
Well,
you?
it's the same as going,
Yeah.
And they all sit and wait for, right?
Well, but that's easier.
Yeah, but it's a lot easier, right? But that's the way I would, so if a tune moves that way for me, I'll hear.
Yeah.
And then I'll resolve. And everyone says, he does know the tune, right?
Yeah.
Same way.
Did you, in fact, when you were studying, I mean, when you were a kid practicing, did you go through the whole classical thing too?
Yes, I did.
You did. So you sat, I mean, with exercises and all that.
The Czerny, the Hanon.
Really? And then one day you said, "What? The hell with it?" I mean, you just said, "Forget this," right? Or what?
I found that there were certain things that made me want to play them another way, which is not the way you do it. And so, being frustrated, I would take these different selections I was learning classically, and I would try moving around jazz-wise, and it didn't happen really because I still don't think it happens today. And through that, I found out that basically I was a player, not an interpreter.
Yeah, well, I think that it's, I don't know about you, but it's just opinion. I don't like it when people take classical things and try to play jazz on them. Not because the pieces are sacrosanct, but because I think I mean, there's better things to blow on.
It's false.
Yeah, because there's that fellow that plays Bach, all the time with the rhythm section. And I mean, that's a joke, because it's neither Bach nor jazz nor anything,
Well, that can be a gimmick,
Yeah.
because you get the best of both worlds, supposedly, but you don't really. But,
No, well, I mean, we weren't really going to do one of those programs where they say, "And up the river came jazz," right?
Right.
But I've never really enjoyed reading books on the history of jazz. I don't know, because people draw conclusions for journalistic reasons, and it worries me sometimes.
Well, I think that, speaking of the players that I admired, my idols, people like Nat Cole, most of the great players will freely admit to their influences.
Yeah.
They'll say, I've heard Lester Young talking about Herschel Evans and Dick, I can't remember his last name, another saxophonist, talking about Coleman Hawkins. I heard Dizzy talking about Roy
Eldridge,
And I think it's a normal thing. I don't think anyone has to really strive to come out of someone. You automatically come out of someone if you're influenced that deeply by them, And the piano, though, to me it's very interesting, because the piano really, for all of the years that it was just part of a background section, so to speak, a rhythm section, throughout all of this, there were still the players that other players came to hear, which says a lot for the instrument, and says a lot for what the players were doing. I know a lot of great, to draw an analogy, I know a lot of great third alto saxophone players in jazz, in big bands, and, fourth tenor players. Yeah. But not too many people go to hear them, right? On their own.
But you know, the one fierce problem, one of the fierce problems of being a traveling jazz pianist, I think would be the choice of the instrument. Because, you know, I mean, this is all very luxurious and beautiful, but how many times have you walked into a club and seen the piano or played it and then just, you know, fallen over at the prospect of having to beat some life into that thing for a while?
First time I heard Art Tatum in a club in Cleveland, he was missing about 7 notes right in this area.
Yeah.
He was, and I sat there. It was his closing night, and I sat there and I was marveling at what he was playing. I knew the piano was out of tune. That's, well,
yeah,
but,
well,
you know,
okay.
when I played, it didn't matter too much. And he came down, and we said hello and so forth, and he said, the nightclub owner was sitting with us, and he said, I'll never forget the remark, he said, you know, you have a young man coming in here that I think is talented. He's coming in. He said, okay, I've been around for a while, and you've got me playing that monster up there. Why don't you get him an instrument, you know? And it didn't fizz on the nightclub owner at all. He just, you know, his pet remark, and this is true, is that he said, what are you talking about? He said, I just had that thing painted last week.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. I tell you though, when I was around playing the circuit for a while, you know, I always dreaded going into a club if the fellow who had just closed had been Dave Brubeck, because he used to have absolutely, you know, into smithereens. That was really difficult work, because he used to really, he must have played with 10 anvils. It was really difficult.
Well, Dave gets excited. He does, really. Dave, I've tried to analyze his playing.
Yeah. You gonna tell me, or what?
No, well, the only thing I can come up with, and I'm not being derogatory, believe me, is that I think he just gets so carried away.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, he just plays harder than any pianist I've ever seen.
He just gets into it and plays, and every chorus gets harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
You know, you can get into that. You know, I think it's enough trouble to just play, and especially if you get up to, you know, this type of tempo. Mm-hmm. I always thought that when you get into that type of tempo, where it's stratospheric, you don't play that hard, because it's a lot harder to get in between these keys and, you know, to get over them.
Yeah. Lately, you've been composing a lot more tunes than playing standards. You know, play one. Will you?
One of my tunes?
Yeah, one of your tunes. a tune like that, will you have written it, in fact, as a piano piece, or will you have written it as a song, lyrics and all that?
That one as a piano piece.
That one is, but it could have a lyric. It's a lovely melody. What you call that?
Wheatland.
Oh, is that part of the
The
Canadian?
Canadian Anna. But that originally was written as selfishly as a piano piece, you know.
That has several movements. That has.
Oh, yeah, they're only, actually, it was a very small suite. It contained, I don't know, 10 pieces.
It had a knockout blues in it. Play that.
The Hogtown Blues?
Yeah.
Funnily enough, Andre, that was written with a big band in mind.
Oh, sure.
Right, and you know, so you're affected different ways by.
You have a huge hand. What can you span easily without trying?
Easily 11.
Filled out too?
Yeah.
You don't have to break it. You just come up from above it like that.
Yeah. Well, I also.
Oh, that's it.
You know, we're talking about Teddy Wilson a little while ago, who was the master of the right.
Yeah.
Broken tense.
Yeah.
I found that I was frustrated trying to play the walking tense.
Yes.
It sounded like. So in trying to stretch my hand when I was a youngster, I found I could walk by using the second finger.
Oh, so you play tense with 4 on the thumb?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it gives it a little more of a legato. Rather than.
Yeah. It's also very difficult to do, by the way.
Yeah, but you know, if you can get it down, then you can walk without that choppy feeling going. You know.
Do you use that quite a lot when you play solo piano? That bass and stride?
Oh yeah,
piano
I
and all
use
that?
it.
That's nice. You know, it seems to me one of the prerequisites for a jazz pianist playing alone is to have some kind of a big hand. I mean, just physically a big hand. Somebody like Bud Powell, for instance, who was, a phenomenal player. But I never heard him play alone, really.
No, not really. He might play the intro to a tune, but
Oh, yeah.
Bud was the master, as you know, of this.
Yes.
That sort of thing. But
Yeah. Well, he used it the way you use tense.
Right.
But was that because did he have a small hand? I don't remember.
I don't really remember, but I know that that was an accepted way of playing when you had a bassist playing. None of this, as you know.
Yeah. No, I don't like that one.
You don't like that one, right?
No. Did you ever play in the movies? Did you ever do films?
I know, I haven't.
Never.
I've never written.
You know, it's funny. It occurs to me that not long ago somebody was talking about the fact that there's never been a film that showed a classical musician correctly. You know, I mean, there's Cornel Wilde spitting blood on the keys and all that, but you know, there's never been there's never been really anything that relates to the way a classical musician lives. And in thinking about this program, it occurred to me that even at that, the way jazz has been handled in films is really revolting. I mean, you know, I was looking for a film clip on Art Tatum because I knew that you and I would spend a lot of time.
That's right.
And so the only thing there is on Tatum on film is a clip from a picture called The Fabulous Dorseys, in which there's a thing of Tommy or Jimmy Dorsey saying, "Let's go hear Art Tatum," and then they cut to a sign outside that says, "Art Tatum tonight." Then you see Art play 2 bars, and then the Dorseys are playing again. You know, I mean, now who asked them? And it's it's incredible.
Well, it's always been treated to me. I'm used to that sort of approach because I always, whenever I can remember as a youngster when I'd see such a movie starring so and so and featuring so and so's group, or you know, I knew that the minute they came on, if it was a nightclub, somebody was going to get up and dance. The guy, you know, the lead would take the girl in his arms and go out on the floor after 4 bars and start talking to her.
Yeah.
You know, or a waiter would start whistling, or you know, or the Koreans would come out. One of these things, you know, or somebody who gets shot. That's usually the way it is.
Yes.
They have never. It's the same. Ironically enough, at home, it's the same problem on television, right?
Oh yes, because there's a lot of jazz scores now on television, but they're always every time you hear jazz played in the background score, it's a safe bet that somebody's stealing hubcaps on the screen.
That's right. And even doing jazz programs, I found that doing a guest appearance in many cases at home. I remember we used to do a tune in this thing. Right? And you stand up at one of those tempos. So we came in, and I said, they said, "Would you run it down for the sound crew?" Fine. So we went down. It was like about a 10-minute thing. Ran it down, went through it in the up-tempo. Said, "Fine. Would you do it once more for us, please?" Fine. Did it again. 3 times. Now Ray is looking at me funny, right? And we ended up doing 17 takes on that. Not takes, 17 rehearsals at it.
But not rehearsals for yourself.
No, not for us. And by the time, you know, I finished the 17th playing for the cameras and so forth, I told the director, I said, "You know, I really don't want to play that tune tonight." It's true, because, you know, you get into a thing where the first time around you play it, and it's about the 4th time you're playing your solo and you might play. Or you might play something like this. Subconsciously you say, I made that pretty well. I just might play that tonight.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
that's
sure.
not honest. But you know,
Well,
what's happening is,
what you mean,
you know,
yes.
what's happening is that you're taking the easy way out,
Yeah.
but you're getting bored. That's, in essence, is what is happening. So you're doing this. So you say to yourself, well, that's the easy way out. And before you know it, if you do it that night, you will play that, and you'll play it badly.
And you'll play it that way all the time after that.
That's right. And then you'll start looking, you'll wait for that part of the tune to come up to play that in. So you'll lose a lot of other lines just to get to that one line, which is not right, you know.
I must say, television here is in England is marvelous for music of all kinds. I do a lot of classical music on television, and of course that kind of rehearsal doesn't really work. I mean, nobody's going to come and say, "Would you mind running the Mahler second for a few times while we get the lights straight?" And 8 hours later they say yes. But I was really talking about in films, you know, in movies, which are still.
It's been mistreated, terribly.
I tell you something. There was a film on television in the States not long ago, which was not only supposedly had jazz music in it, but it was about a jazz musician's life, and it was from a kind of a silly novel called. Well, in the States it was called Young Man with a Horn. You can't call it that here, and I'll tell you later why not. But it was called it was called A Young Man of Music. You with me? Right. And that was really hilarious, because Kirk Douglas played a trumpet player in that. Did you ever see that?
Yes.
Oh, too much. I mean, they would...
Can you imagine what would happen if they ever put together all those films with Steve Allen playing clarinet,
Yeah.
Kirk Douglas playing trumpet.
Yes.
Sal Mineo playing drums.
Yes.
Can you imagine what that would look and sound like?
I've heard it. Yes.
So then you have a very good idea of what would take place. If, in reality, there's no reason why you cannot stick to the musical story as closely as possible. Because it is the artist's life, good, bad, or indifferent. If it's worthy of being a movie, then make it. If it's not, forget it. But there's no use dumbing it up with all kinds of romanticism that didn't really take place. Most of the jazz stories, like the Billie Holiday story, they're really tragic stories. A lot of them are. I shouldn't say most. A lot of them are. So be it. That's the life of the artist. And most artists, as we were saying today, most jazz artists have had to pay their dues. I think I paid my dues by geographically being removed from the meccas like New York City, Chicago, Kansas City, L.A. I was in Montreal, and we were record listeners and radio listeners, and it was an event to have a Duke Ellington come up or a Teddy Wilson. So I had to pay my dues and scuffling trying to put my things in order so that I could play. Well, that's all part of growing up musically. Yeah. And I think you should show this if if that's the artist's life, that's it.
Who's going to play you when they make a movie about you?
Roger Williams.
That's evil. That's really evil.
That's not evil.
That's funny. Play another one of your own tunes. I love
Another
your
one
own
of mine?
tunes. Yeah, I like your own tunes.
See if I can remember it.
That's really nice. Something that I miss very, very much it makes me sound, I don't know, querulous and old, but I mean, something I miss now with the younger players is that kind of happiness that you have in playing, and the fact that you're just simply having a good time. I mean, I remember in the days when I was peripherally at least involved in jazz, we always had a marvelous time. And when we got through playing for the night, for what we got paid to play, we would then go and play, right? And it was because we really loved it. And that's the kind of fun of it seems to be going. I mean, I even see it in sleeve notes, record covers. I always fall for it. I always fall for it. No, but I mean, it promises so much more than intellectually necessary, really, because I read those record notes and I read something on the back of the album about what's inside, and I think, well, it's the key to the absolute. It's the answer to everything. It's obviously the most staggering new thought in the world, and I fall for it every time. And I buy the record and I take it home and they're playing the blues. It's not that interesting, but. I don't know. Why do you suppose people are so dead earnest now about playing instead of having a nice time the way we always do?
Well, I think that what has happened, really, Andre, is that the music, the so-called music of the day or the pop music, changed a lot of it, a lot of thinking, and a lot of people felt they had to belong to this. A lot of young players, without realizing they were falling into the trap that they were not taking in the tremendous backlog of music or musicality that you need to be, let's say, a jazz pianist. I've played some of the rock tunes, very few, but I've played some. And but I still had to play all of the, and wanted to play a lot of the other tunes that affected me. You know, music, there are only two kinds, good and bad. I think we agree on that. And because it's categorically, this may be rock, or this may be jazz, or this may be classical, it doesn't, you know, turn me off either way. Well, unless you develop with all of that backlog and storehouse of musical capability behind you, you're not going to grow but that big. So consequently, as you will find out, a lot of the rock players are now in jazz schools trying to recoup and get back into this thing.
Well, that's nice.
You know,
When you go around and play, are the audiences getting younger again?
you're very young. Very, or else I'm getting very old.
What do you call very young? I mean, you know.
14 and 15.
No kidding.
At concerts. At concerts. We played a concert in Toronto recently. We had about close to 10,000 people, and there were youngsters, no more than 14 or 15, sitting
And they dug
3
it.
or 4 feet away, just amazed at what we were doing.
Oh, that's nice. I mean, that's hopeful. I love
of
that.
course. You know, I think that it's only natural, and good music is good music.
Yeah. Play something else.
When are you going to play, aren't you?
Oh, I'm not going to be silly.
You're not
Just
gonna
play
play
some. No, just play something. I'm perfectly content.
I'll play a Hampton Halls blues for you.
All right. Good thing about television is that they can make cuts when something doesn't work later, right? Now, the last time I tried to play anything in 4/4 was 12 years ago, roughly. But I'm having too good a time. Humor me. Play something with me. Anything. Something slow, easy, a scale, right?